Hi, everybody. Welcome. Just going to give a couple minutes, let everybody join the call today. Thanks for being here. Like we have about half our attendees. Give another little minute here for people to pop in. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I think we will go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today, and we'll just let folks continue to trickle in here. Excellent. All right, let's get underway. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're really pleased to have everyone here again with us, continuing to dig into education and outreach efforts for the Recycling Modernization Act. If you attended our introductory webinar, welcome back. And if you missed the introductory webinar, no worries. We have posted that recording, so you're welcome to watch that at your leisure. And Ari will drop a link to that webinar in the chat for you now. So feel free to go ahead and bookmark that. If you missed it, feel free to watch at a later date. We'll also drop that a little bit later for folks who aren't quite in yet. We will cover some of the background from that presentation today, such as upcoming actions and project timing, but in briefer form. So if you'd really like a nice broad refresher of education outreach for the RMA, that introductory webinar will be really helpful for that. The purpose of this webinar is to serve local governments and service providers with information about education and outreach efforts. And today we'll be reviewing components of the USCL communication strategy, including language and imagery, and introducing a feedback survey. So if you're not a local government or a service provider, this webinar may not be as helpful for you. So just wanted to let folks know that upfront before we get underway. So we're really excited to be here with you again. We hope you are too, as we keep moving forward to launch this effort next year. This continues our engagement to make sure that our local governments and service providers across the state have what you need for a confident, successful start. Today, we're going to start with some introductions, move into a quick recap of the RMA, and then really dig in and share some key findings and recommendations from the recent public survey, give a broad background into the Recycling Partnership's research and best practices, and then talk about how we translate those best practices and the Oregon audience research to the USCL imagery and language. We'll close with some details about the type of customization we expect for the USCL materials, and then details about the feedback survey that will be open to you following the conclusion of this webinar. As a sneak peek, you will have 2 weeks to complete that survey, so you have time to review with colleagues, perhaps share this webinar for those that missed it, and then provide your feedback. And before I hand it over to Alex with Circular Action Alliance, I wanted to go over some logistics for today. So the chat is open as we're going to be asking for your thoughts during the presentation. However, if you do have a question, please ask that using the Q&A function, as that will allow us to address some questions as we go along. We have a lot of subject matter experts here with us today. And if there's anything we don't get to today, this gives us a really nice record to follow up on. So any questions, comments, please use the Q&A. That is a different section than the chat. So take a quick look now at your options so you can find both the chat and the Q&A. So we have a lot of team members on the call today, and I'll first hand it over to Alex with Circular Action Alliance to begin our introductions.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. It is great to see so many folks online again. This is our third education and outreach engagement with local governments and service providers this month. We've heard really a ton of feedback. It's been great, lots of questions. We got that from the October 9th webinar and then AOR earlier this week. And the level of detail that you all are thinking about has been really amazing. We might not be at that level of detail yet, but we're going to get there, and we're going to keep sharing that information with all of you as we keep moving forward. From AOR and the earlier webinar that we had earlier this month, two themes have really been highlighted for me from this engagement, and that's flexibility and adaptability. So together, we're going to launch the first extended producer responsibility program for packaging and paper in the United States. Like, that's huge. And this also might be the first time that the whole state of Oregon is having a shared recycling education program. That's also huge. And to get there, we're all going to have to be flexible and adaptable. But the thing I can commit to all of you is through all of this is making sure that we're listening to you, that we're hearing you, and that we're taking that feedback and considering what you're saying. It might not be exactly what you wanted, but we're going to make sure that we've heard your feedback and take it into consideration. And in return, I would just ask that all of you keep that same open mind and that flexibility and that adaptability when you're working with all of us. So let's talk a little bit about Circular Action Alliance now. CAA is the only producer responsibility organization here in Oregon to submit a program plan. But CAA also operates in Colorado, in California, and we were founded by 20 member companies who we call our founding members, but we represent more than them. We've already had over 1,500 producers register here in Oregon, and we work with all of you because this is a huge amount of work, like I just said, and we at CAA cannot do that alone. That's also why we partner with the Recycling Partnership to help us with this work. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see CAA's mission, and we're more than just this in Oregon. Although we're going to continue to work closely with producers, we're also a partner with local governments, service providers, community-based organizations, and everyone in Oregon who recycles to make sure that we're delivering on the goals and expectations of the RMA. Next slide. So CAA has been involved with the RMA for a while now, all the way back to Rulemaking 1. And now we continue to build this really amazing Oregon team. So hopefully you were able to connect with some of these folks at AOR, or you've been able to talk to them in meetings, and that there's familiar faces here that you know understand Oregon and Oregon's recycling system. We really want this program to be a success. And so we're making sure that if we don't have the knowledge, we're finding it within Oregon or from all of you. So that's the team. We're going to continue growing, and we're going to continue relying on all of you to help make sure that this is the best program we can build. So back to you, Sam.
Thanks so much. I got to meet a bunch of those people in person too. So that was great. Really nice to be in Oregon just a couple of days ago. So for anyone that is not familiar with the Recycling Partnership, we pride ourselves on being a team of experts, practitioners, and thought leaders with real world experience who are delivering on our mission of building a better recycling system. And we have a proper gaggle of Recycling Partnership team members on the call today to help us run the show and answer questions that you'll be interacting with today through the chat and Q&A. So I'll first hand it over to Emily to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Krieger. I work for the Recycling Partnership, and my role is doing the project management for the E&O work. And I will be one of the people manning the Q&A today. So I will throw it to Dan.
Hey everybody, Dan Leaf. I am a recycling policy director on the implementation side here at the Recycling Partnership, based in Portland, and I work to just kind of connect all the dots between how we at the partnership are working with CAA and also with communities on the ground, and also be helping to answer some questions here. And I will hand it over to Allison Francis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Francis, and I work at the Recycling Partnership. I am the creative director, and I work out of Asheville, North Carolina, and I have worked on education and outreach through the partnership for the last 7.5 years. And I will pass it to Trina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Trina Mata. I'm VP of Policy Implementation at the partnership, and I'm based in Atlanta. My role is to work with a team of folks who support CA, providing technical assistance for all states. So I'm kind of dipping into every state. And Sam, I feel like, who are we missing? Ari. I'll pass it to Ari.
Sorry, Ari, we can't hear you.
Maybe mistake. My apologies. Hi, I'm Ari, and I am on the policy team also at the Recycling Partnership, and I am supporting the education and outreach execution. And for in today's capacity, I am helping drop in links and give the polls as well. So you hear my name mentioned as Sam gives me cues, and I am based in California. So I believe it's back to you, Sam. Anyone else?
Excellent. Now I think that is the whole crew. You guys were perfect. We had a little list and everything, and I said this won't work well, and it was perfect. So we're nothing if not organized at the Recycling Partnership. So hello again. My name is Samantha Longshore, and I'm here to assist with local governments and service provider communications around education and outreach efforts during this coordination phase. It was really wonderful, again, getting to meet many of you in person on Monday at the AOR Fall Forum. But for any new faces, I am based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At the forum, I learned there's a Milwaukee, Oregon, and I still think that's really neat. It's been 2 days. And I serve as a community program manager for the Recycling Partnership. So my primary role is working with local governments, service providers, and state and regional agencies to implement projects from infrastructure to education and behavior change. Prior to joining the partnership, I served as the Resource Recovery Program Manager for the city of Milwaukee. So I bring with me that experience at the local level, including awareness of the many hats you wear. So those things are always top of mind for me as we're implementing these exciting programs that have some logistics to think about. And you'll hear more about our work today, but at the Recycling Partnership, we pride ourselves on being research-backed and data-driven. And today we're going to explore more of that research and on-the-ground experience that helps us translate best practices for the public to help close what we call the intention behavior gap. We know that folks generally want to recycle and recycle well, so we try to learn what their barriers are and how to remove them. All right, so you've heard who we are, and now we'd love to get to know each of you a bit more. So it is time to jump in the chat. Please let us know who you are, what's your name, where are you from, what is your role? So please feel free to jump in that chat and start introducing yourself. I'm going to open up the chat and take a peek as well at all the folks that are joining us. All right, hey Laura. Laura, representing Laura's table from AOR. We have some DEQ joining us as well. Excellent. Thanks so much. City of Beaverton. Oh, now we're going. I see Eugene. I see Portland. Got our service providers here as well. Waste Connections, City of Hood River, Ecology joining us. Rogue. Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. All right. So keep it going. Feel free to stay in this chat. Again, let us know who you are, where you're from, what is your role. Love hearing from you and seeing who is with us today. All right, so now it's time to really get into it. We'll start with a quick refresher on the RMA and a reminder, if you want more detail, make sure to watch the recording of the introductory webinar if you missed it. And Ari will drop a link to that webinar in the chat one more time for folks who may not have been able to join us right at the hour. So again, feel free to bookmark that and take a peek at our first webinar. So before we jump into our refresh, I wanted to share some of the feedback that you left us through registration for this webinar. These are some of the key themes we heard from you when asked what was most helpful from the introductory webinar. And we were really glad to hear folks found that webinar helpful and really appreciated the basic information, including the timelines, which we'll review again today with some updates. And what you were hoping to learn from today's USCL Communications webinar: materials, outreach, education. So you all understood the assignment for today. You know why we're here. And a lot of folks were really excited to learn about CAA's approach to delivering education and outreach. We also found that many people were not able to attend our introductory webinar or maybe realized they weren't the right person. So a new colleague is here, and we knew that might happen. We're really happy to have you, and thanks for making sure that we have, the right folks and the right decision makers in the room. So we saw a lot of interest here in going back to some of the basics and learn about the USCL, the recycling acceptance lists, lots of mentions of those lists, and folks really want to become experts. So while others were also excited to keep digging even further into details like the development timeline and the plan to execute this work. So there was also interest in understanding the research that leads to the proposed approach for communications on both the instructional information and the statewide campaign. So definitely saw some interest in that, and we will definitely dive in a bit more. Some folks wanted to learn more, period, or wanted information on everything. So we are going to do our best to deliver that for you today. Excellent. So thank you again for providing feedback through the webinar registration. It's always nice to sneak in as many touch points as we can. So we're going to address as much of this as possible today, and we were intending to move a bit more quickly through this next section, but it is repeated information from the introductory webinar, but again, from that word cloud and the registration. Again, there were some folks that are still looking for that overall background. So we also added some additional slides as late as last night to make sure we're covering more of what you're looking for. So that said, this is meant to be a 2.0 webinar. So if there's anything we don't get to today, just a friendly reminder to enter your questions into the Q&A function so that we can keep hearing from you and getting you the information that you need, no matter where you are on your journey with us through the RMA process right now. So again, we're going to be working to get some of those questions answered. But if anything we don't get to today, this will help us keep a record and make sure that we're following up. So here we have a high-level overview of the phases for education and outreach implementation, which are outlined in CAA's Oregon program plan submitted to DEQ. And this slide may be getting to some concerns for folks around timing. And please know that we're absolutely aware that having materials in time for July is crucially important. So we just want to reassure everyone that we're working to create a process that helps to streamline wherever possible, because we understand everyone has a form of approvals they may need, council meetings, procurement guidelines. So we're keeping all of these things in mind as we work as aggressively as we can to have the things you need ready to go. But we also want to share that we encourage this effort as less of a light switch and more of a rolling start. There are many parts and pieces, and there will be phases of resources for you, for households, businesses, and the general public. So here is a look at that in phases. So these are rolling phases working to help build upon each other by providing new information, but then also tweaking, reinforcing, and being able to give different audiences what they need to meet them where they're at. So on the previous slide, again, we referenced the phases that are outlined in the program plan, but we wanted to take this moment to briefly pause and get a quick temperature check. So Ari is going to launch a quick poll for us so that we can ask, what's your familiarity with the program plan? Now, just last month, the second draft of the program plan was submitted. So we'd love to know if you've seen the first program plan, the second plan, and that will give us a nice baseline of the information that's already out there and where we may need to dig into more or provide, more opportunities for as well. So we've already got some answers coming in. Looks like the majority of folks did skim one or both of the program plans to become aware of what's going on so far. About a quarter, fifth of folks haven't read either draft. All right, so we have about 67%, 69% participation. So feel free, again, get your answers into the poll. We'll give another few seconds here, and then we'll share those final results. All right. Looks like we have most folks in, so let's go ahead and close that poll, and then we'll share those results. Excellent again. So again, the majority, somewhat familiar, have skimmed one or both of those program plan drafts. A little over a fifth of folks have not seen a draft at this time. We'll give you some resources on that. And a few folks have read both of them as well. Excellent. So again, kind of a wide variety of where folks are at. So this is really helpful for us as we move forward, just to kind of understand where folks are at and what they have seen and what they have not. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So with that information, now Ari is going to help us out yet again. She's got a lot of jobs today, and she's going to drop 2 links into the chat for you. So the first is DEQ's RMA website, where both program plans are posted, as well as a link directly to the second program plan, which is the most recent available. So please bookmark those for your use. And if you haven't been able to take a peek at those yet, some light reading for your enjoyment. And you'll find a section in that program plan that is specifically for education and outreach as well, if you want, kind of a place to jump in and start. But again, feel free to review those and see all of the pieces as they're currently proposed. All right. Another slide you may be familiar with. Here is insight into how we'll make sure that materials will be ready in time for you to start your planning before next July to hit your distribution goals. During the interim coordination period, which we're in right now, educational materials will be produced and made available to local governments and service providers in a series of batches. The batches are described in the following graphic. Today, we're really getting into the imagery and the language best practices that will shape several of the educational materials in batch 1 and batch 2. And early next year is when you'll start to see those materials in draft form, pulling all of the pieces together, including the instructional elements we're talking about today, as well as the branding and that motivational messaging of the statewide campaign. And as we mentioned earlier through our webinar registration word cloud, there were quite a few mentions of folks wanting to learn more about the recycling acceptance lists. The USCL guide is one of the first materials that you'll see drafts of, as it is in batch 1 in this image. But Ari is going to drop a link to the Oregon Adopted Recycling Acceptance List document so that folks can bookmark this page and dig into this a little bit further, especially before you jump into the feedback survey, which we'll talk about at the end of our webinar, as this will be asking you some questions about your program and use of the lists. And while there may be some final tweaks, you can use that document as your North Star. And one of our next steps is creating the USCL guide, which will help translate that list with language and imagery for these products and final material categories that are really recognizable to the public. And here we wanted to share some insight into what education and outreach expenses will be covered by CAA to help in your planning. So the delivery of the statewide campaign, again, the ads that you will see more public facing, more motivational will be covered. Design of the local education and outreach tools and printing of those materials will also be covered. Distribution is not covered, and we know the methods used may be varied depending on how you decide to spend the available funds, which might be postcards through the mail, billing or inserts that could be delivered with a sewer bill, for example, or direct-to-door outreach for multifamily. So we know there's a lot of flexibility there in terms of how local governments and service providers will choose to distribute. For contamination reduction programming, $3 per capita will be available, and then education and outreach associated with both system expansion and new customers will also be covered. So today we're focusing on the USCL communications components, which will help us craft the educational materials that use that instructional tone, which you'll see here in the darker blue, and help with basic material instructions. Additionally, there will be engagement around campaign concepts, which really helps to get to that motivational tone that you see in green, and the underpinning campaign and message that really helps us connect all of this together. And as we continue in that coordination phase, or phase 0, as we're calling it, that we saw on the previous slide, today we are really digging into the first goal of education and outreach as outlined in that second version of the program plan for the RMA. And that's to effectively build widespread recycling awareness among all Oregonians, including residents in single-family homes and multifamily communities, as well as commercial businesses, institutions, and non-governmental organizations. So what we call the USCL communication strategy that we're talking about today are the elements that are helping us to spread awareness of the recycling acceptance list materials, increasing knowledge of where and how they'll be collected, and how folks should prepare them for recycling. So really getting into that instructional tone and the how. That's our focus today. All right, so now we're going to dive into that research that many of you expressed excitement for, and we'll start with the most recent audience research and key findings. So just a bit of background on the quantitative survey that was performed. It was programmed in both English and Spanish and achieved a representative sample of people living in Oregon using a quota approach to achieve a mix of urban, suburban, and rural perspectives, a mix of single-family and multifamily households, and a mix of homeowners and renters. We had several research objectives, which you'll see here, and that were discussed in more detail on our introductory webinar and the October 2nd ORSAC meeting. But for a quick refresh, we wanted to establish baseline data for future assessments of the education and outreach campaign, because again, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? We wanted to identify knowledge gaps to increase participation and provide the roadmap for the statewide campaign. So that motivational messaging that will complement the instructional materials we're really digging into today. And the quantitative survey is really a helpful tool for developing the statewide campaign and insight around the motivational tone for educational resources. But there are also key findings that support the best practices for USCL images and language. So what follows here is a sampling of the quantitative survey findings, and these really stand out as critical for USCL communications specifically. So two initial insights are that rural community members are less likely to believe recycling has a positive impact, that it's easy, and that it's an expectation in their community. And we also found that while awareness is high for all recycling collection types, those which require travel, such as depot locations, are regarded as less convenient and are used less often. So while this doesn't translate directly to the images or the phrases we would use, I still wanted to share these recommendations that we should be thoughtful about efforts in rural areas, especially in those that lacked access before. We'll have a bigger behavior change ask there, and we want to make sure that folks know where recycling drop-offs are, when they operate, what they accept, because we already know we have some barriers due to just travel alone for starters. So we should keep in mind how to simplify the other pieces. The next insight we wanted to highlight is that Oregonians already view recycling as easy, but they admit it's confusing. So we really need to focus on a message and materials that are simple and clear, which harkens back to the word cloud from our introductory webinar. Clear and concise really rose to the top as important for you. And here we see it's really important to the public too. So this is a key piece. And in upcoming slides, we'll talk about the methods we recommend for simplifying, such as grouping similar materials to limit visual overload. In the next two insights, we found that some of the top undesired recycling behaviors that the public reported doing were things like not rinsing their recyclables, bagging their recyclables, and lining their containers, which led to that issue. So a lot of issues around how they're preparing their materials to recycle. Additionally, there's a belief that to recycle better, people need to be able to recycle more types of materials. So there's an opportunity for us to shift this belief and let folks know it's also really important to make sure we're recycling all of our currently accepted materials correctly, because we know through research and data and some of these behaviors reported here that we're losing a lot of recyclables at the home due to contamination like food or beverage waste or incorrect preparation like bagging. So we should also provide simple instructions on not just what is accepted, but how it's accepted to help close that capture gap and make sure we get more of that material into the system. So we have 2 more slides of insights for you. And here we see that our self-reported above average recyclers might have some ingrained bad recycling behaviors that lead to contamination because they've been doing some of these things for a while. So this tells us that if we can keep it clean and simple, we should also be raising some top contaminant issues to help solve those right out of the gate for folks. Additionally, I really liked this second insight that reminds us to not only think about super recyclers and the ones that we're probably hearing from over the phone or on our social media that are really kind of front and center for us because they are very engaged. But we really need to focus on our weaker recyclers and finding out what they need and where they are on their recycling journey. Because with them, there is a lot of material that we can unlock and contribute back to the system. So we need to keep them top of mind, but often that also means seeking out what they need because we're not hearing from them. And our last insight is that Spanish-speaking, BIPOC, and rural audiences have a lot of potential for increased recycling, and we need to make sure that we are crafting messaging and resources that are culturally resonant, that are in language, and again, are simple and available. So we'll address one of the strategies for that in how we transcreate our educational materials and incorporate relevant language and imagery in a seamless way so that it can remain front and center. So that was a bit of a crash course. Ari is going to start another poll for us, and we want to know from the audience research we just reviewed, which one of those key recommendations is your biggest watch out? So maybe you think we're doing really well and are on the right track with a lot of these, but maybe there's one that really popped up that really spoke to you as something to put on a post-it and keep on your computer to keep in mind to make sure we're really staying true to. Of course, our intention is to make sure we're accommodating all of them, but let us know if one of these, really caught your attention. So biggest watch out from the public survey findings, again, that are specific to USL that we just covered. Is it ensuring rural communities have what they need and making sure we're accommodating, making sure materials are simple and effective, making sure we don't miss the how to recycle the right way, or calling out some of those biggest contaminants or the most common mistakes when preparing materials to recycle. Maybe it's continuing to make sure that our materials are resonating with diverse populations. So which ones are really, really jumping out to you? All right, so we've got over 70% in so far. So take a moment, let us know what stood out to you there. We still got results coming in. We'll give another few seconds here. And then we'll go ahead and close this and share our results with folks. All right, almost 80%. Okay, let's go ahead and close this and take a quick look. All right, so really a big mix, which is great. I'm glad that we're kind of thinking about all of these. So top of mind here is educating on how to recycle the right way. So really kind of standing out for folks on that. Next, creating culturally resonant materials, followed again very closely by educating on those top contaminants, making sure we stayed focused on rural communities, and then simplifying our educational materials. So not just saying it's easy, but making it simple. Excellent. Good mix. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So thanks for letting us know your thoughts on those findings. I know it's very initial. You haven't had much time to sit with those findings, but I think we're starting to see a lot of the same key themes. So I think we're really homing in well. And next, we're going to take a look at more research and development from the Recycling Partnership that has guided our best practice journey for education and outreach. And you'll find that a lot of our learnings over the past decade from work all around the country is really consistent and reflected in the things we continue to hear from the public that's most important to promote their understanding. So first, here are some key learnings that we keep really close. We know educating the public can be challenging, and that's why we've been doing the work over the last 10 years to make sure what we offer is remarkable. That includes quantitative, qualitative research, in-home research to observe and discuss behaviors with members of the public to see how they recycle at home and where they struggle. And we perform pilots to study possible interventions to solve those observed problems. And when we can prove something works, we are implementing infrastructure, education, and behavior change improvements with our community and state partners in projects all across the US. And with this experience, we know that most people feel confident they know how to recycle, but contamination numbers will tell us that confidence doesn't do the full job of creating a clean recycling stream. And in my previous life, when I was with the city of Milwaukee, what I appreciated most about the partnership was the research being done and strategies being tested, and all of the resources made available for the things that work. And you can see some of the results here in our studies and tools available. As a team member of the Recycling Partnership now, one of our core values that sticks with me most is that we embrace change and drive action. It's that same piece I appreciated when I was with a local government, that it wasn't all on me to reinvent the wheel when many days you're just trying to make sure that recycling is getting collected. So we really pride ourselves on being able to assist with learnings and implementation. And we can get a lot done when we work together toward that clear, concise, and motivating messaging that everyone across the state of Oregon will receive. Whether you're at home, at work, you're at your grandma's house, it's clear and it's kind and it's consistent. So we're first going to look broadly at best practices developed around imagery. Through user tests and in-depth interviews, we found that people gave their highest scores and their nicest compliments to educational materials that were clean, had legible fonts, had an organized presentation, and were free of clutter. And we know there's a push and pull between the amount of detail and the simplicity of the design. So it's important to work towards a sweet spot. Sometimes we have limited time, limited budgets, so we try to include as much as we can in every piece we can. I was certainly guilty of that. But we found materials without extraneous messages or instructions and graphics really resonated most with folks. So staying focused is really important. And to help us on our journey to developing the cleanest design with the best recognition, we tested how many possibilities do you need to show folks to reach understanding. So for example, when you show a plastic water bottle is recyclable, does that translate for folks to knowing that plastic soda bottles can also be recycled? And we found that individuals were able to understand that both items would be recyclable while just showing one, because they fell within a recognizable category. But when items get a bit dissimilar, then that recognition is more challenging and calls for its own image or category. And now we'll stick with a few more of those very broad understandings that served as a guide, in this case, for developing the language we use to name and describe materials and how to recycle them. So what we've learned is that people want language to be plain and to describe literally what they see, rather than a term like soft plastic or plastic film, which felt unfamiliar to the public. Study participants opted overwhelmingly for the simple and descriptive plastic bags and wrap to describe this category of items. So this really guides how we derive that instructional language that we mentioned earlier that guides our USCL specific educational materials. These should use simple and understandable language. Additionally, this testing gave us insight and guidance into how we derive our motivational language or our conversational tone. We found that people appreciated a feeling of warmth when we included phrases like, "Thank you for recycling these." And you'll see exactly how we've implemented these in upcoming slides together. So here's a quick look at those results we mentioned around the testing of how we should refer to film in educational materials. So really overwhelming results there. And we would love to do another quick exercise, which we always enjoy internally when we're testing new messaging. The things that we think are going to resonate often surprise us. So Ari is going to start another poll for us. And we'd like to know, what language do you use to explain contaminants that wrap around the equipment at a recycling facility? So we have a few different options here: hoses, cords, and wires, things that tangle. I love stringy things. Personally, I always call these tanglers, because when you're at a recycling facility, you see these materials physically tangled in your equipment. And when you think about these materials and what category they might fit in, you might think, yep, that's a tangler, because we're going to have to cut that out of our in-feed drum, right? So I know exactly where that's going to end up at my recycling facility. So personally, I know I'm in the tanglers gang. Let's see, we've got pretty stark differences so far. So a little over half have participated, so feel free, jump into the poll. Let us know what you call these. What do you refer to these as? All right, getting close to the 70% mark. We'll give everyone a couple seconds and then we'll close this and we'll share out the results. Looks like we've settled in here. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and end the poll. Share these out with folks. Excellent. All right, so pretty stark divides. Nobody likes stringy things. It is funny though, and you have to put it in. So really split between hoses, cords, and wires, and tanglers. Again, my favorite, and the thing that I always use to describe these as well. Very interesting. Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and close this and then actually show you some results from these public surveys. So rather than tanglers, or even things that tangle, which feels pretty simple, right? More than 90% of people would prefer the straightforward hoses, cords, and wires, exactly what they are. So I hope I didn't mislead anyone. I use tanglers all the time. But so it can be really difficult to take a step back and think about how we should refer to materials when we eliminate all of this knowledge that we have that our public doesn't. They may have never been to a MRF tour, let alone seen an in-drum feed. An in-feed drum. So hearing from the public can be really crucial on things like this to make sure that we're speaking their language. So that's why I really love digging into this audience research and seeing the results of our pilots and our projects on the ground in real time, and really getting time with members of the public, friends and family, and hearing their opinions, because we just have a very different set of base information when it comes to recycling. So it's great to tune in. I personally love hearing what my brother thinks he can recycle, because his thinking always kind of makes sense. So it's really helpful to think about how we can reroute those connections to make sure that we're recycling in the right way. Okay. All right, so we've shared a bit about our body of research and the journey we've been on with people and communities all across the country, supported by this most recent research and testing here in Oregon. So now let's talk about how we translate those broad best practice learnings and audience key findings into the imagery and language for the upcoming USCL educational materials. First, we've learned that where the information will be displayed, such as home, work, or depot, drives the level of detail that people want. So here are two examples. As people make most of their decisions about what to recycle in their kitchen based on our data, this is where they want access to more detailed information. So this is a great place for a mailer that they can put on their fridge or pin up in the pantry after they receive it, that has some accepted materials, perhaps some top contaminants and contact information. On the flip side, when you're standing out in the weather, by a cart or a dumpster, people said they would like the information conveyed in a more streamlined way. So this could be a container sign that says, here's what's accepted, simple and sweet. This also tells us that if we're trying to reach rural communities with more information, where drop-offs are involved, postcards to households, or detailed signage at entrances that has information about the times that they're open, the accepted materials, where folks are perhaps still inside cars and driving in, these can be opportunities for providing more detailed materials in those spaces. In our Oregon audience research discussed earlier, we heard that folks don't need to be told it's easy, but they do want us to simplify. And what we know is that realistic material images and terminology with the right amount of color and groupings play an important role in engaging people. So grouping recyclable items in logical categories helps people process the information and make more accurate recycling decisions. So this is how we're not just telling people that recycling is easy. We're simplifying the message, eliminating the clutter, creating an organizational structure, and improving recognition. Now, please don't be mad at us if your educational materials have a lot of different material images like this example here. We love that you are educating your public. And I myself at the City of Milwaukee used to have a giant list of not accepted materials on the flip side of our info card that looked very much like the one on the left. Was anyone reading that? I don't know, maybe one or two people. But saying, hey, if you don't see it here, it's probably not recyclable, might have been a better choice for me. So these are things that we learn through this type of research and audience testing. In this case, we tested collateral with 20 to 25 recognition points. And a recognition point is information we want people to recognize, against those with 45 to 50 recognition points. And the posters with 20 to 25 recognition points resulted in more accurate responses and fewer complaints. You'll see a snippet here describing how people even physically responded to the posters, which I think is very neat. Next, we know that color helps to increase recognition. When choosing between packaging samples illustrated in abstract monochrome and others in full color, people almost always chose the more colorful option. Realistic illustrations were preferred over stylized icons or line drawings. Immediately relatable, realistic illustrations where recyclable items' shape and colors resembled actual products they saw in stores helped most people to relate to the information more easily. Many felt more engaged with the information when they could visualize the products that were pictured and make that immediate connection with items in their own fridge or pantry. And people clearly preferred materials with clean but vibrant color. Interviewees said the color caught their eye, and survey ratings confirmed that more colorful materials were both preferred and led to more accurate answers. And what you're seeing here is that example I mentioned before of how you can combine instructional language with motivational language. Here we have both that clear, literal language that the public wants, but you'll also notice a best practice of including really brief instruction under the categories that gets to the how to recycle. And this harkens back to that finding that the way folks incorrectly prepare recyclables can lead to a lot of lost capture. So this is a quick, friendly way to guide preparation. In addition to this instructional language, you'll see a simple incorporation of that friendly language by turning our yes row into a thank you for recycling these, which brings in that motivational messaging that folks reported made them feel a warmth and an appreciation for their actions. In addition, in the key findings of the audience research, we found that super recyclers and weak recyclers alike had a few incorrect habits, like bagging their recyclables. Here we're zooming in on the inclusion of just a few top contaminants, and 6 is generally our max. And this can be used to help teach those new behaviors for folks that think they've got it right, but maybe getting this clean new piece where they're seeing that behavior called out might catch their attention and help us achieve that behavior change that's really important, but is often so hard to switch yourself out of. And people reported that they once again appreciated color. And here it was the use of color as a guide, commenting that they wanted the items they should not recycle marked with a bold red. So that's how you'll see these lines were created here. And through audience testing, we also reaffirmed the importance of messaging and resources that are culturally resonant, that are in language, and are simple and easily available. You'll see examples here of trans-created materials and the best practices that ensure inclusion of items that are culturally relevant built right into the material categories to improve that recognition of these full categories for everybody in our communities. So materials are also in language to avoid having non-English language materials kind of stuck away on a website or difficult to disseminate. I ran into this same issue at the City of Milwaukee where we had these pieces in Spanish and Hmong and Arabic, but disseminating them was really difficult because they just had one language. So having bilingual materials can help you distribute these more seamlessly to your public through many of your existing methods. All right, so we started broad guiding concepts. We've drilled down into how we translate what the public has told us what they need. And now we want to dig even deeper, get a little more specific, and talk about some of the best practice customizations to educational materials that stem from several key takeaways from our education and outreach work, which has significant consensus behind the findings from user testing and research. The first, again, is that where matters. Again, talking about that location. So again, we know that even though people want information about what to recycle and what to leave out, detailed information can be overwhelming. And where the information will be displayed drives the level of detail that people want. And then we also know that the USCL may change over the years. So we need materials to be perennial over time. So we can accomplish this in a few ways. First is that detailed batch materials like the USCL guide can be made available on websites for those who want more information, those really engaged folks. And then websites or QR codes on collateral can drive those who want more detail to the right resources. That way, distributed materials like your mailers can remain clear and consistent, really have those cornerstone materials, while detailed information that holds those unique changes over time can be found online as well. So this is how you make sure that you have that base set of information that your public can rely on, that can remain consistent while you update on those unique details. And the next is that folks want to know that help is one step away. We know that people feel committed and confident about their ability to recycle, but they also want a phone number or website so they can reach out if they want or need a little help. So in addition to websites, which can drive those who want more detail to the resources they need, including contact information can help the public feel assured that if they have a question, someone is there to help. You'll also see some logo placeholders here, and this is an example where co-branding with the community and CAA's education and outreach brand can come together so that your residents are seeing this through line and this connection of the broad encompassing program that is reaching them at their doorstep with mailers, perhaps during their commute as a commercial, at the bus stop as they walk through their community. So all of these pieces will tie together and help share a story. So we're not only talking about what and how to recycle, but also why. And we also know that not all programs will look exactly the same. While we have this cornerstone of accepted materials in the USCL and pro recycling lists, there may be differences in the number and type of accepted material categories. So for example, you'll see in the top image, we have 4 accepted material categories in which glass is not included. In the bottom, you'll see a variant of this design that has 5 material categories where perhaps glass is being collected alongside curbside recycling and may need its own instructions. So we expect flexibility in the number and type of material categories. In addition, there would also allow customization within those categories to accommodate specific materials. Here you'll see 2 examples of what the metal category could look like based on what your program would accept. So you could choose an image with just tin and aluminum cans, or perhaps you have an image where aluminum foil and aerosol cans are also being collected with USCL materials. So there could be customization flexibility with the number and kinds of material categories, as well as the materials within those categories that you're collecting. And those customizations would follow the recycling acceptance lists and where there are nuances. Okay, all right, we've made it, everybody, through most of it. We have a little bit more. So I know that was a lot of information, so thank you for hanging with us and remaining engaged. We have just a few more slides for you that will cover some next steps, and then we'll have some time to discuss any questions that we may not have addressed in the Q&A as we've been going along. Again, if you do have any other questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A for us as we wrap up here. So included here is information about the education and outreach timeline. This slide will also look familiar to folks from the introductory webinar, so I'll be brief. There have been some things that are added, of course, lots going on. But as discussed in the introductory webinar, this timeline is reflecting the feedback that we're getting and which groups we're working with, as well as the efforts that are being reviewed with ORSAC. At the top of the slide, as a reminder, kind of grayed out and all the way to the left, the Recycling Partnership and C+C, a communications agency we're partnering with on several aspects of the Education and Outreach statewide campaign, gave a presentation on October 2nd to the ORSAC Education and Outreach Subcommittee, going over the results of the quantitative survey that we just discussed, some of those key findings and recommendations for today. But if you'd like a deep dive on that effort and to see all of the recommendations and all of the findings, Ari is going to drop the link to the ORSAC page into the chat. So when you go to that page to find any upcoming meetings that you see here, but also recordings of past meetings that will be added, scroll down to the Recycling Council meetings section. And on November 5th, right around the corner, we'll be discussing more aspects of the USCL communication strategy with ORSAC that we discussed today. So much of the same content. But if you attend that, you'll be able to hear more of ORSAC's feedback as well. So tune in to that if you would like. And then in December, we'll be reviewing the statewide campaign concept in full, which you will also find on the ORSAC website that Ari just posted. So again, feel free to jump into those, add those to your calendar. And then, of course, there will be more coming around the corner in the new year as well. So kind of stay tuned for that. But just as a quick sneak peek, for the next review periods that will likely be those batch 1 and relevant batch 2 materials, you can expect similar review structures, so likely presentations where we can all come together and review these materials, as well as feedback surveys. And we're going to combine those review periods wherever possible to help streamline that for communities. We don't necessarily want you to have to go through a review period for each, specific material. So we will look to be thoughtful of your time with that. And then local governments and their designated service providers will have 2 opportunities to review and comment on draft USCL focused educational materials. So we have a few next steps that you can take right now if you are in fact the local government or service provider that is the best contact for future education and outreach feedback opportunities for your community. In order to make sure we continue to hear from you, we ask that you please fill out the contact form provided in the emails you've been receiving from me. Even if you have been getting those emails from me, but you haven't filled out that form, we do please ask that you fill out that form if you have not done so already, to help us create the best contact list as we continue to go forward in future years. And Ari is going to drop a link to that form in the chat. Again, this is just meant for local governments and service providers. This contact form is not meant for producers or CBOs if we happen to have some of those folks with us today. If you've already filled out this form, great. You don't need to fill this out again. Also, multiple people filling out contact forms for the same community or same company, just fine. You won't overwrite everybody can fill that in, so you can't have multiple contacts to the same group. And then in that form, you're also going to see a link to register for the webinar. That is for the webinar you're on right now. We just wanted to leave that available until the last minute, so folks had an opportunity to get here today. So feel free to ignore that. And we'll give a little bit more insight into the survey and the in-depth conversations next. Okay, so we're really excited to be releasing this official feedback survey, which is now live. Ari will be dropping a link to the survey in the chat now. So feel free to bookmark this so you can complete it in the next couple weeks, or start exploring that today after we close the webinar if you have some time and start taking a peek. So in addition, a link to the feedback survey will be distributed via email after this recording of the webinar is available online. So we will encourage anyone that wasn't in attendance to watch this webinar to watch this before taking that feedback survey, so that we're all starting from the same place on the background around these efforts. To allow us time to review, have in-depth discussions, and incorporate feedback, the survey will close after Friday, November 15th. But this does give over 2 weeks from today to gather your thoughts, chat with coworkers and service providers as needed, and provide your thoughts. The survey has 4 sections, so we'll be looking for your contact information, program information, gathering some feedback on familiarity with the RMA and the recycling acceptance list that we talked about today, learning more about your current education and outreach, and then how you hope and intend to incorporate and use the educational materials for your program. Please note that the last section of the survey does have several long-form open questions where you can really expand on your answers and give us as much detail as you'd like. So please build in that time to, again, let us know your thoughts. And then the very last question of the survey asks if you are okay with us reaching out to you for an in-depth conversation, if there is something in the survey results that we didn't answer or maybe want to dig into further with you. So that will be on an individual basis and as needed to learn more about your answers to the feedback survey. So please remember to give us a yes or a no on that question at the very end. All right, and we are going to use the last of our time together for some additional Q&A. But before we jump into that, we just wanted to thank you all for spending your time with us today and for engaging with this process to make this effort successful. A reminder for anyone that may need to hop right now on the hour, this webinar will be posted online on CAA's website, and we'll send a thank you email with that location and a link to the feedback survey again. So please keep an eye out for that email. That will come from me. So thank you again. Please stick around if you'd like to participate in a little more discussion, if you have some more questions that you'd like to put in the Q&A. And if not, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Great job. Thanks everybody for hopping on today. Lots of good questions in the Q&A. There's a big desire for folks to get some more information and dig into the research. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's the reason? And so some of that has been dropped into the chat there. And we will try to get some more of it, this specifically the Oregon research, find a home for that to be posted. I know that we shared some of it with the Recycling Council, and I think there's going to be some more to be shared with them, but those slides haven't been posted on DEQ's website yet. So we'll see if we can find some place to get those posted and share out all that research and surveys that were done. Maisel asked, thought the webinar was 2 hours. We set aside 2 hours just in case there was, allow some time for questions and feedback. So, you know, it might not take the whole 2 hours and get a little bit of time back in your day. Let's see. Right, there's a question about language access. The CAA plan includes translation into several languages and then lists some of those, and the use of qualitative interviews in these languages to inform the creation of non-English materials, demonstrating an intent to engage non-English speakers. However, there's no mention of indigenous languages spoken by Oregon's immigrant community or migrant communities, which could affect outreach efforts, as many individuals in these communities may not be fluent in English or Spanish. It's a great question, Alex, and a good call out. There are, I think, 10 languages in addition to English that we're planning on creating materials in, and those are languages that are spoken by 2,000 or more adults. There was a little bit more exactly on how that was figured out, but I think it's based off some of the voting. Trina, I saw you hop in there.
It's based on the statutory requirement. It's 2,000 people over the age of 5 who speak English less than very well, according to the last census. So it's based on census data, and it will be updated over time as things change according to the census.
Thank you. And CA will also be able to translate, maybe not right off the bat, but we are looking at a way to, if a community does have a need to translate materials into a specific language because they have a group of folks that speak that language, but maybe it doesn't reach those limits that Trina just mentioned, we could hopefully, support folks in getting that language translated for the materials. Great questions. Feel free to keep typing those into that Q&A if you still have them. Hopefully, the fact that we're not seeing tons of questions means that folks are starting to get some of the information, which is good and great. Aaron Stein said, uplifting the fact that branding and rebranding is costly. Yes, it is. What has been shown today could result in the need to rebrand many materials, which is very costly. Not only cost, but also staff capacity needs to be weighed to ensure communities receiving messaging. Yep, I think this is something that we heard loud and clear at AOR, and especially for some of the materials that are coming out soon or need to come out maybe before July 1st. And so we heard you. We're taking that feedback, and we'll hopefully find a way to make that a little less painful for everybody, while still getting the goal of the RMA, which was to have similar education and outreach materials across the state so that no matter where you are, you're seeing something very similar. So we're trying to really balance those two needs and the desire to, a lot of folks in the metro area just got some new branding or new images and things like that. And so we hear you for sure. We're trying to figure how best to support you all for that. So yeah, we be sure that we've heard you. Thanks, Bailey. That's glad that you're getting
Can I make a quick little plug on that as well? Those are also really helpful bits of feedback for the feedback survey as well. So definitely, I know a lot of these things we're sort of answering here as well, but again, that is definitely perfect and things that we do want to keep hearing in that form as well. So please feel free if you put it here to also include that. Any concerns there in the feedback survey as well, so that we have them in both and can really think about that as a whole as it's coming in. So
yeah, and Allison, Lindsay asked if maybe you could speak a little bit to the photo versus illustration if you have any of that. I'm not sure if you have it right off the bat, but if you do, it'd be great.
Sure. We are in the middle of doing more research on this, but I will tentatively say that we are looking at photo realistic imagery. So we are really trying to balance, we are doing research where we are looking at the balance of what resonates with people so that they know that what they're seeing is recyclable. I know that this is a really important decision, and I guess I'm not prepared to speak to it. Maybe I'm not prepared, but I will say that what we're seeing in research, where we're looking at photorealistic illustrations down to icons, is that there can actually be too much information, and so sometimes people are taking the brands that they see in our collateral very literally when they're being asked about that. And so we do just want to find, I think, some great things were highlighted in comments too about how we want to find the right balance of not promoting a certain brand, but having complete understanding. And so we are still doing research to understand this, and I'm going to share that with you when I have it.
Great. Thanks, Allison. I know that the illustrations versus images is a hot topic. We don't know of a ton of research out there on this. The Recycling Partnership, Allison just mentioned some of the work that they're doing. But if you all have something that you have found, feel free to send it my way. I'll drop my email in the chat. But again, I don't know there's a lot out there. So some of it is best we can do, and some of the research that TRP is mentioning there. Let's see.
Angela, I could answer your question. Has there been any field testing with this imagery where you're testing one type of image versus another related to tonnage? I can tell you we haven't done that. I think that that would be incredibly complicated to do. What we've been doing is doing tests for surveys. We do run surveys on imagery, and we also do in-depth interviews and focus groups. And so that's the kind of research we've done on the imagery.
Excellent. Great. Kate said, when we see decal styles, are these examples for posters, brochures, and decals? The stuff that you were seeing here today is not finalized for Oregon. So don't think of what you saw here today is what we're proposing. This was more just to kind of give you a general idea of where we're going and how we're thinking about things moving in that direction. And lots of good questions about translation and transcreation, how that's going to be done. So those are getting answered in there, it looks like, which is great. That's I'm glad folks are thinking about that. And I think the program plan talks to some of that. So if you, again, haven't had a chance to do that, I understand it's 300 pages. I've read it more than I would like to. But it's very, I cannot stress enough how important I think it is. It can answer a lot of the questions that you might have and that come up for you, both on education and outreach, but also on all sorts of other things as well. So even just skimming through it, I saw a bunch of you had done that. But if you are in the education and outreach space, I would encourage you to go to that section and read through that to just really understand what our thinking is and where we're coming from and kind of how the plan is to move forward. There will be the final program plan submitted in early December by CAA to DEQ, and those usually get posted on the recyclingact.oregon.gov website pretty quickly after that. So keep an eye on that. And I know DEQ sends out a gov delivery when those are submitted. So, you know, you're going to have 300 plus more pages of reading coming up soon, but the education and outreach section probably shouldn't change too much there, but it's definitely, that is kind of the guiding light right now for where we're headed. All right. Dave Larmith asked, what about media bleed from the metro area if they are allowed to keep a larger list versus the rest of the state? Great question, Dave. And a lot of the earlier messaging over the next, couple of years as folks transition is going to be about changes coming. So changes coming and where to stay engaged and look for that, as well as on general contamination reduction. So we wouldn't say, this is now not a contaminant, put it in your recycling bin. It would be very general things like don't put bagged recycling or bagged garbage in your bin. Instead, those general things that everybody would be needing to look for. So we do understand that there's going to be a few different programs and types of programs as we're moving forward. And we want to make sure that we can support all of those as best we can. Again, more questions about decals and images and things like that. And again, we hear you. We're working on a way to hopefully alleviate some of those concerns. Aaron asks, did the recycling partnership consider the benefits of requiring simple color-coded circles on products versus QR codes. A blue circle, black circle for recycling versus trash. It wouldn't have to be large if people knew it was there via a marketing campaign. Aaron, are you talking about actually on product color coding, or are you, yeah, on product? So, that is, I wish we had more control over what could go on product and kind of labeling there, but sadly we don't. I know that the Recycling Partnership did work with How to Recycle to try and upgrade some of that information that folks can get, and that went to the QR code because there isn't one list for the whole country. So it's very difficult, or even for one market. Washington and California recycle different things than what Oregon does. So it's very difficult to try and just do a single, this is or this isn't recyclable within a product labeling. So that QR code kind of gives that changeability, adaptability to a product that way.
And I can say we do, as you mentioned, we have some resources that we are working on that is on the product. It's not specific to Oregon in this case, but something that would be nationwide. So while it's not Oregon specific, certainly you can feel free and take a look at Recycle Check and some of those efforts that Alex mentioned with How to Recycle as well. So separate, but definitely something that we're thinking, and that's definitely something I saw at AOR this week that people were like, there's an app for that, and this sort of need for a one-stop shop. So definitely something else that we're thinking about, in those batch materials and that website and that go-to place for Oregon's statewide campaign that kind of ties all this stuff together as well.
Tim asked a question about would customization and distribution of educational materials be covered expense for local governments? Sorry if I missed if this was answered. So the production, the templates will be covered by CAA. You'll be able to make some edits of those within our portal. The distribution of those items would be up to the local governments, just like it is now for under Opportunity to Recycle Act. So if you're doing your annual mailing, or some folks include that in utility bills, that sends that out, or they do a mailing with their calendar, or however you do it at your local government, that would be something that would be covered by the local government or the service provider, however that works in your community. But the production, the printing, so the design and the printing would be covered by CAA. Great. When will local governments have access to contamination reduction funding to help with education and outreach efforts? Is that the same tiered model as other RMA funding? So the contamination reduction funding, that $3 per capita, will be available. I'm not exactly sure what the timeline is on that one, because it can cover more than just like sending a postcard. There's some options. DEQ shared many of them on Monday at AOR. Some of those draft ideas that they have could be cart tagging. One that got some claps from the crowd was putting cameras on the trucks. And so that kind of, there's lots of different things where that could go. And I do know that some of that funding can be requested in advance. So more information on that will be coming, but a little less focused necessarily. Donnie, I see your comment about customizing signage for schools. So we will have some customization available. And so we've heard about schools and things like that. Hopefully they are recycling similarly to other folks. And so, yeah, we have that in mind, and some edits should be able to be made that address what you need there. Are DEQ and CA certain that the USCL will not change before 7/1/2025? Do you have a sense of the frequency of the USCL? So DEQ set the USCL in rule, so I don't think that they will be changing their list anytime soon. That takes a pretty big process. CAA would have to do an amendment to the program plan. And since that program plan period doesn't start until 7/1/2025, there shouldn't be changes to the USCL before that, because that's when the program starts. However, CAA has suggested within the program plan to add transparent blue and green PET bottles right off the bat to the USCL. So that would be the big change right off the bat. Let's see here. There is a question about equity and internet access and outreach. The CAA plan acknowledges internet access disparities between rural and urban areas and proposes direct mailing to reach those with limited digital access. While direct mail is helpful, rural communities and older populations, especially those with non-English communities, often rely on more traditional forms of media, such as radio and community meetings. Question: given these preferences, are there plans to expand outreach efforts to include additional strategies, such as radio, local newspaper? 100%. Yes, we are not just saying that we're going to only do direct mail and that's it. We heard from folks that, they sometimes don't remember what comes in the mail or don't check the mail. And so on top of mailings, we also have plans to use other forms of media as well. Great question. All right. 41 questions. Great. That's so many good questions that are coming through. Again, y'all are thinking about detail that is amazing to see. And you're really looking at those. And it's cool to see that you all are so committed to making sure that your communities get the recycling information that they need. Give it a couple more minutes, but I'm not seeing any more questions flowing in. Again, I would just like to plug the fact that there will be a follow-up survey, or get to it in the chat there. There's also, if you haven't, if Oregon DEQ's Recycling Council hasn't been top of mind for you lately, there are some upcoming meetings. So November 5th from 11 to 12:30, the Education Subcommittee is meeting. So that's maybe something that you would be interested in attending. I will drop the link to the Recycling Council in the chat so that you can all see what is upcoming, but that's always a good place to stay up to date. There's a regular council meeting in December, and there's going to be some education and outreach information shared there as well. Oh, let's see. All right, looks like those are all getting answered. Great.
And I will bring just one of these questions forward so you can see it and answered. But Lindsay did ask when would we see the next round of draft materials? And again, just so everyone knows, the next rounds of reviews are planned for mid-January. So there's nothing official yet, nothing scheduled. But you will likely receive information for that in the same way that you receive for these webinars. So again, kind of a stay tuned at this point, but that is when we expect those next one to come around.
Great, yeah. It's there. Folks know what to expect. Again, it looks like we have cleared out the question and answer panel there, which is good to see.
And this
All
is
right.
great. We were seeing a few questions about what format would the images and the materials be in. And as Allison mentioned, like we definitely want to hear that from you. So this is another perfect piece to put into that feedback survey as well. Feel free to dig into that much detail, like we want them in both PDF and images, or I want them in, InDesign, or whatever that preference would be and why. Please definitely feel free to put that kind of detail in the feedback survey for us. So thank you for asking about that.
Yeah, and hopefully folks won't need the InDesign files, because we'll make it super easy for you to be able to edit to where you need to within some templates that we can share. Marcel asked, are we planning on sharing the questions and answers? I don't know. We could put together like a little FAQ maybe, and kind of group some things together. Again, a lot of these are going to be able to be answered within the program plan for some of these, and some of them wouldn't. So we'll see what we can do there and get back to you on that one. All right, well, every time I'm like, no more questions, boom, there's one. So changes to the USCL. So the person asked, coming back to the question about changes to the USCL, as this will affect printed materials used for E&O, identifying recyclable materials and contamination. It seems critical to identify changes. Did you mention blue and green PET, ASAP, and perhaps adopt changes to the USCL on an international schedule? Oh, intentional. Still working on reading today, I guess. Yeah, so in the program plan, WCA has recommended to add transparent blue and green PET right off the bat, kind of more of an oversight within the original list than anything else. And those actually help with the color of recycled plastic, come to find out. And it evens out some of the gray. So that will be on the materials that we create, and we will make sure that that stuff is to you. There's also, yeah, there is an intentional schedule on when we'll be rolling things out. The third program plan will outline when we plan to make those additional program plan amendments or submit those to DEQ for things like thermoforms or the clamshell containers that a lot of folks are very interested in recycling. And I have made sure to raise the awareness that that will result in some changes to education and outreach materials, and we want to be cognizant of that. And so we're going to try to group as much of those together as we can. But again, as this is a brand new program and we're rolling things out and we're going to be learning together and working through a lot of these things, we're going to have some learning curves on how we're putting materials out there. So again, as I stated at the beginning, flexibility and adaptability, that's been something that's been extremely important for me over the last, 7 weeks so far in this job. Lots of changes, lots of things that we thought we had an idea one way and maybe had to change it or work to find a different solution. And we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to keep learning from each other. We're going to keep listening to you, keep hearing your feedback in places like this and all the other places that we're working to engage with you. So keep it coming, definitely. We're hearing you, we're using it, and we're changing how we're doing things based on that. All right, lots of thanks in the chat. So it looks like folks might be wrapping up on some of those questions. We appreciate you all being here. Thank you. Again, this is great. This is a conversation that we're having with everybody, so keep that coming. We really appreciate the feedback, the flexibility, the adaptability of everybody as we move forward. So I think with that, we're probably good to end a little early and let folks get a little bit of time back in their day, because I think we can all use a little extra time in our lives.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, y'all.